All right. Greetings, fellow Earthlings. I am John Petersen, and this is A Raging Atheist YouTube channel. We're here tonight for an open discussion between atheists, and it was going to be between atheists and Christians. And as it turned out, is atheist against Christian, because one of the fellows hasn't shown up yet. Perhaps they'll show up a little late. There's really no set topic in mind, and I just want to throw it out there to the chat. If there's any Christian that shows up that would like to come in, that any of us here knows, you're welcome to join us. Just tag A Raging Atheist or Nakasuchi in the chat and let us know you want to come in, and we'll get you a link, and you can definitely come in. As I said, it's just going to be an open discussion. We really didn't pick a topic. If there's any questions you have for anybody that's here, please put those in the chat as well. Any topics you'd like to hear us discuss. The Christian that has joined us tonight is Cameron James. How you doing tonight, Cameron?
I'm doing well, thanks.
We're also joined by Dragnauct Sylvas. Good evening, Drag.
Hey, what's going on?
And this is Wednesday nights, my normal night on A Raging Atheist, but as luck would have it, A Raging Atheist was not working tonight, so he's joining us as well. How's it going, Doc?
Yeah, pretty good, man. Pretty good. Yeah, my guaranteed night off from now on is Thursday. My other one kind of fluctuates, and it landed on a Wednesday, so I'm here.
Cool. My apologies to everybody, too. I've been around for the last couple of weeks. I kind of took a couple of weeks out to reset my jets, and just want to take a minute here before we kick it off and say hi to folks. Mr. Sangelic is here, Celine Fredema, Yoko Higginbanya. Hope I said that right. Hi, AR. How you doing? Celine. And who else we got here? Marty. Oh, Marty Camijo's here. Love Marty Camijo. Tony Designs, our resident Schiller, is in the house. Jared Whitaker. Thought I saw Jeremy's name back there a little ways. All right, so I guess what we're going to do to start things off now, Cameron told me before we started, he identifies as a young Earth creationist, and I'm going to let him take a few minutes and just, kind of tell you about himself and about his, what the basis of his Christian beliefs are and the, young Earth creationism. But just go ahead, Cameron, and take a few minutes and let folks know what you're all about.
Well, I'm retired now, and I worked for the Houston Police Department for 32 years, and I was the most notable job I had was a homicide detective, and people were dying to meet me back then, and unfortunately, I didn't like meeting them that well because they wouldn't talk back. But anyway, now let's see. I've been a Christian most all my life, and I thought up until the 90s and stuff, I never thought about the age of the earth or anything like that. And I thought the best argument we had for Christians was, you asked me how I know he lives in my heart, which is a powerful argument for Christians, but not so good for you guys, I imagine. But I think in the late 90s, I got a CD of Ravi Zacharias, and I was like, wow. There's philosophical and scientific arguments for Christianity, and I was rather excited about it, and I started getting into it, and I heard everything that Ravi Zacharias ever said on his website anyway, and then I got exposed, I don't know how, but into creationism, and eventually I saw some of the arguments for a young Earth creationist, and I was basically a theistic evolutionist before, but anyway, I became a creationist and a young Earth creationist after that, and some of the main arguments is the Earth's magnetic field, and maybe we can talk about it. But every 1,400 years since they've been measuring it, it has gone in half, so it was twice as strong 1,400 years ago, and 2,800 years ago was 4 times as strong, and there's some problems if you get over 20,000 years. And different things like that. And they now know the moon is moving 1.5 inches away every year, but they assume that it would have had to move faster Well, when it was closer and 1.5 billion years ago, it would have been touching the Earth, is what they say. And so there's different evidences like that I'm interested in. And with evolution, I question the engine of evolution, which is mutations. And I think mutations, for the most part, are bad or neutral. Maybe the body can take them. I don't know if they're really neutral or not, but they don't have any effect. And also, the 2016 Royal London Society, they're the ones who started pushing for evolution for Darwin, and they pushed for neo-Darwinian evolution when they thought there was a problem with evolution. And then 2016, then in their meeting, they came out and said, we got to find a new engine, and besides natural selection and mutation. And more recently, over 1,000 scientists signed an online thing. I don't think they put their names on there, that said random mutations and natural selection just don't cut it. But I believe in natural selection. We can see it with a wolf running down a lame deer or something like that. I believe that's true. But mutations just doesn't have the power that they need for Darwinian evolution to be true. So that's just an introduction.
Well, and I could see, if you don't believe in deep time, if you believe the Earth is only 6,000 years old, then yeah, certainly it takes more time than 6,000 years for some of these mutations to pile up and cause speciation. But you did say about the mutations now. So is it your contention then that for evolution to be true, then all mutations would have to be beneficial, would have to add something, would have to improve the...
I would, for my opinion, is that it would have to be at least close to 50-50. Maybe 30% could be the lowest, is just in my mindset. And I think it's like 1 in a million or 1 in 10,000. I've heard the least number right now, and I just don't think that's going to cut it for beneficial mutations.
Yeah, I mean, because as far as my rudimentary understanding of it is that a mutation isn't necessarily a beneficial thing.
Yes.
Change is change. But here's a question actually for you from the live chat. And I love StreamYard has now started colorizing the super chats so that they can be seen in the StreamYard.
Oh, really?
Finally.
I can actually start paying for StreamYards again then, because that was one of my biggest gripes about them.
Yeah, it was the same color as all the other chats posts, and you had to catch that there was a dollar amount at the front of it to know that it was a super chat. And this is the first I've seen it. They are starting to put the color in it now. And this is from Kent Hovind CPA, one of the best viewers we have here. And he asks our guest, do you know that Ravi Zacharias lied about his PhDs?
I knew Kent Hovind, I got basically an online PhD from a place that was really not a PhD place. That he got a PhD in education, I believe. And Ravi Zacharias has gotten honorary doctoral degrees, but I didn't know that he ever claimed to have a PhD. So I don't care about PhDs that much. I just go with what they have to say. And he really is a brilliant guy.
I don't even know who it is. I have a couple quick questions because I wrote down a couple things from your opening, and then I'll let John or Drag pipe in. But you said that the moon is moving away from the Earth. I didn't quite catch all of what you said, but I do know that this is something that young Earth creationists say. This is something that a person that I'm very familiar with says and said in one of our face-to-face discussions, Matt Powell, and I actually had a nuclear scientist on that, and I can't remember all the things that she said, but we had 2 points that young Earth creationists used that she came on and just completely trashed those ideas and thrashed them. That there's no scientific merit in at all that for one, the moon would have been touching the Earth, or that it's somehow proof of a young Earth at all. The fact that it's moving away at such a small pace is natural. It's due to gravity. And she completely went on with it. But then another thing that you said that really caught my attention was 1,000 scientists signed something or another, but they didn't put their names. And is this an accredited petition?
Well, they are very friendly to scientists who come out against evolution, and I don't think they'd get them to put their names on there. And they say that they have verified them, and whether it is or not, I can't say for sure. As far as the moon, NASA, when they put, I think, 3 missions, they put these sensors up there, and they could reflect lasers back, and they have to actually hit the thing to do it. But they discovered that it was moving, 4 centimeters away or 1.5 inches away, and it's the astronomers or cosmologists or whatever, they're the ones who came up with the idea that it would have been moving faster away earlier in order to escape the Earth's
do you understand that in order for it to move far enough away to affect life on Earth, that will take a matter of billions upon billions of years?
Oh, at that rate, I think in another billion years.
I think that your number is probably off. I don't have the specific numbers that she used. She was a nuclear engineer from way better. I dropped out in college because I was drinking every night. So I can't tell you what she said, but I had a whole hour and a half stream.
She didn't agree with 4 inches or 4 centimeters.
Say what?
She didn't agree with the 4 centimeters.
I can't remember what number she used, but I definitely remember that she thoroughly debunked it, and that was one of the things that she said, that it would literally take billions of years. By all accounts, I think that the Earth
it's in a very good position right now as far as our tides and for cleaning out the ocean.
Yeah, it's a very good position for life on Earth. Yeah.
And let's say 100,000 years ago, it might have been causing floods, and maybe 100,000 years from now, our oceans aren't going to get cleaned out like they should. So it's just another interesting tidbit of information that I think is interesting.
Right. So you listed a myriad of things, all the way from certain physics to geology, hydrology, young Earth creationism. I remember we had you on the Magic Sandwich show, and you had talked to CRISPR-Cas9 about mutations, and so it seems that there's kind of just almost a shotgunning effect, when we have some of these discussions. So. Mm-hmm. I guess kind of my hopes is to let's see if we can kind of just draw it down into maybe a few things, just a few rudimentary beliefs, such as, well, how does one come to the belief and certitude that a deity even exists, much less interacts with the physical world? So maybe that's something we could start with.
Real quick though, before we do go on to that, and I think that is a good direction to take. When you mentioned 1,000 scientists that signed this petition, what percentage of the worldwide scientific community would you think that 1,000 scientists constitute?
Oh, I would say that's a small percentage.
Probably way less than 1%.
Yeah. But we had a discussion about mutations already, and the guy I was discussing with, he said, well, a mutation could make you an inch taller with your leg bone getting an inch taller. But I'm like, I want real world stuff, and he really wasn't able to give me a good mutation. So
and just real quick too, we got another super chat, not a question, but Ken Hoven, CPA, says Ravi claimed 3 PhDs on his bio until caught. So
okay.
Just had to read. I mean, I'm not throwing that at you, Cameron. I'm just reading it because it is a super chat, and we always want to read the folks' messages when they donate some cash to the cause.
All right.
But yeah, go ahead and address the question that Dragnauct had for you. If you need him to repeat it, he can.
Okay. Well, the Bible says that you can look for evidence in the heavens. The heavens declare the glory of God. It also says in Romans 1:20, verse 20, that you can look for evidence in the creation. And so if you look at different things like how did amino acids come together, how did proteins come together, how did DNA come together, those are all problematic and should be addressed. And if you don't have an explanation for them, it's time for you to look for a new model. And with evidence, which I'm big on, you have direct evidence, which is eyewitnesses or cameras or whatever, and you have circumstantial evidence. And with circumstantial evidence, you have to come up with a scenario or a circumstance to explain how it got there. And so when you deal with evolution, it's more like coming up with a scenario. And if your scenario doesn't match the evidence, then you got to look for another scenario of how it got there. So anyway, just DNA coming together and the whole cells coming together and life from non-life is problematic. But then you go all the way to the other extreme. The most complicated thing in the known universe, they say, is our brains. And that's why I don't drink alcohol, because it destroys your brain cells, and I need all I can get. And anyway, your brain is amazing. It has more.
That's actually a myth, by the way, but go ahead.
It has more connections than all the internet connections and all the computer connections combined in your single brain. And with the these connections aren't just connections like connection switches, like we're connecting two things together. They're each microprocessors. And in studying the brain, I found some guys came up with this idea that the brain has 11 dimensions. This is just beyond amazing. And your brain and your DNA, supposedly in just your body, if you stretch it all out from every cell end to end, it'd go twice the diameter of the solar system. Just the human body is amazing. And I say the time plus chance scenario is problematic. And I say the creator, intelligent designer argument, special creation meets the evidence better.
So when you say, go ahead, John.
Well, no, I was just going to say, it sounds like a lot of what you just said there is that you don't see an explanation for a lot of things. And so you want to give an explanation of therefore God. I mean, isn't it just that, and when you talk about the beginning of life, which may be explained through abiogenesis or some other process, that's a different subject than evolution itself. So we don't know how life first began, but just the fact that we don't know, is that good enough evidence to say that there's a creator?
Well, I believe that it is an assumption of evolution. If you don't believe in special creation, if you believe in theistic evolution, then you don't have that assumption of abiogenesis unless God was involved. And so,
isn't God though an assumption as well?
Well, we have to look at the evidence, and I'm just saying that the design points to a designer, and once you have a designer, you know that he had a purpose in designing it, and there had to be an intelligence behind it. And
but has it been established that the human body or any biological life form was designed? Though, isn't it just that it has the appearance of design?
Well, a lot of people, atheists, say that it does have. Richard Dawkins, of course, says that the universe has evidence of design, and actually the multiverse theory was started because the universe is so fine-tuned that it's just impossible it could come together by itself. But if there's an infinite number of universes out there, it's the odds of one one of them being this finely tuned, becomes more realistic.
What's the evidence of design that you have? So you said evidence of design. If somebody designs a car, we have blueprints, we have actual evidence. What's the evidence that you have that anything's designed?
Well, you don't have blueprints. You have an explanation in the Bible, of course, and
the Bible's a 2,000-year-old book that was a quarter of it was written by a companion of Paul. So I don't see how that's valid.
The New Testament.
A quarter of the New Testament, yes, correct, was written by a companion of Paul.
He was the best historian at the time, actually, Dr. Luke. And so
Luke was a physician. He wasn't a historian.
Yeah, he became one, though, and he was the best at their time.
He became one because he was traveling with Paul and he was writing his propaganda, right?
Well, no, actually, the book of Luke, obviously, he went on his own and interviewed people around Jerusalem. And I think he interviewed the mother of Jesus in different ones. And he did.
Your evidence of that is what?
That's just what you could conclude based on of what you have in the writings.
The only thing we really know that he did is he traveled with Paul. But I mean, we got off the point. My question is, what is your evidence of the design?
Yeah, I just see it in the DNA, and
that was a weird thing that you said. You said that we have enough DNA to fill the solar system twice.
How do you come to this measurement? Go across the diameter of the solar system.
How do you measure DNA one, and how do you know that there's enough in one human body to fill the solar system is huge.
Yeah, I know. I'm the one. I'm not the one who come up with it. I do research, and this is what other people come up with. And
who came up with that though?
Yeah, you can Google it, but it's basically each cell has 3 feet of DNA in it. Is what they say.
3 feet of DNA does not fill a solar system twice.
Okay, 3 feet of DNA, but they say you have 30 trillion cells in you, and some say now up to 100,000 cells in you. And so if you take,
let me
just Google it.
But I think that one thing before we get too far past it, I think that when you quoted Richard Dawkins, that you maybe were taking something out of context, because I don't believe Richard Dawkins ever said that there's evidence of design all throughout the universe. I mean, I find that pretty incredulous that he did that. That sounds like some quote mining to me.
No, he did.
I don't think there's evidence of design in the human body. I mean,
and the other thing is, okay, we're talking about the 3 feet of DNA. Now, if there was 3 feet of DNA in every cell, I mean, how would that? I think maybe. Are you sure that that isn't that they're not saying that the code, if you wrote it out, would be 3 feet long for every cell? Not that there's a physical 3 foot length of DNA in every cell. That's not what you're saying, are you?
Yes, that's what they say.
I mean, it sounds to me like it would be more that if the code was written out, that it would be 3 feet long. Dragnauct, have you heard of what he's talking about?
Yeah. So people are talking about if you stretch like genetic code out, like you could because they have an actual length, like they're physical objects. So if you just stretch it all, it's one of those things that people just use that to kind of demonstrate how compact nucleosomes are and the DNA packets within the nucleosomes. That's all that it is. There's nothing remarkable or special about that. Like DNA or genetic material gets packaged within smaller size cells. They get packaged within tissues, and that's all that it is.
Well, but now if you stretched it out to get that 3 foot length that Cameron's talking about, of course it would be infinitesimally.
Of course, you couldn't see it with a microscope. Of course.
Right, it would be so thin that you still wouldn't even be able to see it.
Yeah, no, you wouldn't be able to see it visually, but it's long. That's all that illustration is, to show you that it's long. That's literally it. There's no other actual takeaway from that, other than you have a lot of some material packaged in a very, very small, container.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. Like, it just seems to be an argument that a lot of these young Earth creationists make, is that DNA is somehow evidence of design, and I don't think it is. Like, I don't think that any scientist is going around saying, hey, DNA, that proves God. It just doesn't. But young Earth creationists seems to think that it does.
Well, hey, hold on 1 second. Dragnauct, did you send a link to somebody?
Yeah, to Aventus Hermes.
Oh, okay. Is this another Christian that's joining us?
Yes.
Welcome. I'm being on good behavior, I think.
Yeah. No, you are. And I wanted to get back to what you were asking Cameron too, and give him a chance to respond. I just want to welcome our new panelist, Adventist. What is it? Adventist Hermes. And would you want to call you Justin?
You call me Justin.
Oh, okay. You're the fella I emailed the other day. I never heard back from you.
Yeah, I thought I responded, but I just didn't.
Yeah. No, but thank you so much for joining us. Aaron did not show up. But going back to what Nakasuchi, and feel free to jump in, whenever you have something to say, Justin. Mm-hmm. But going back to what Nakasuchi had asked you before I got us off track there. About the evidence. I mean, what I'm hearing is that you have come to conclusions based on observations that you find to be evidence for the existence of God, the existence of creation. But you used the word assumptions a while ago, that people make assumptions when it comes to evolution. Isn't that exactly what you're doing, though? I mean, Nakasuchi asked you what actual evidence you have that proves what you're saying, and all I'm hearing from you, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. Is that I'm hearing you state these observations that you made, and then what your conclusions are. That's not really evidence. That's just to use your word, assumptions of what these observations point to.
Well, they're actually using the law of cause and effect, which is a fundamental law, and it used to be very important until I think quantum physics got rid of it. But you really can't do science without it, and I think myself, metaphysically, I like to know what the cause is, and quantum physics, for example, doesn't care what the cause is. They just like to see all this neat stuff, and I'm like, let's think about what could have caused all this neat stuff, and they're like, oh, don't be stupid, don't try to bring God into it. And so anyway, but looking at the DNA, they say in a teaspoon of DNA, it can hold all the information of all the books that have ever been written in the world. So that is beyond amazing. The whole DNA thing is really, truly beyond amazing how much information can fit in just a little bit of it. And I just look at it from the law of causality and just all kinds of things I have a problem, like how did consciousness come from unconsciousness if you use the law of causality, because the cause has to be greater or equal to at least the effect. So mentality, consciousness, morality, all these things are metaphysically problematic.
The cause has to be at least as equal to the effect?
That's what I believe, yes.
So what about like an atomic explosion, though?
Yes, that's the cause. It's got all that energy into the atoms themselves, and so what holds them together? It's a nuclear energy, the strong force that holds them together. So when you break that up, that has the capacity to cause this great explosion. And that's another big subject I like to talk about is the four forces of physics, the electromagnetic, gravity, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force. I say they're all electrical force, and so that's another thing. But anyway, that's because I'm a Nikola Tesla fan.
Well, now here, let me ask you this though too, because you said a little phrase there that they're all electrical forces.
Yeah, I don't know many people that believe that, but I do.
Well, but are you? Well, and that's why I hit on that phrase. Are you a fan of Mud Fossil University by any chance?
Never heard of it. No.
Okay, well, because there's the fellow that runs that channel, Roger. He talks about that a lot. That there's no neutrons and protons, and he says it's all electrons and it's all electric. But
I've heard that before, Yeah, so certainly I don't hold to that exactly yet because I haven't really looked into it, but I'm open to the idea.
So, Justin, Cameron here, he identifies as young Earth creationist. What form of Christianity?
I'm a young Earth creationist as well.
Okay. Well, Nakasuchi, when you came in, you just after Nakasuchi had asked Cameron, he had made several statements about what he believes from his young Earth creationist position. And then, as you heard me repeat, Nakasuchi had asked him, well, what evidence, can you provide, for your young Earth creationist belief? Would you like to take a few minutes and maybe give us a thumbnail sketch of what your position is from a young Earth creationist, and maybe share whatever you feel evidence that supports your claims?
Sure. Well, most of us we're dealing with a lot of presuppositions that we have to, have laws with. So if we presume that the Earth was created, just by some rock that just collected dust, and then eventually there was some kind of like volcanic, eruptions all around the Earth, forming it, creating the mountains and so on. Then somehow water just came on the Earth by some asteroid or something like that. You would have to go by the rules of how that would play out. So it's the same thing for creation. If we believe that God created the world in 6 days, and then also, 1,000 years later, he flooded the Earth, we would have to go by the rules of what you would expect to see from that. And as far as, seeing how the Earth is now, it makes a lot of sense that there was a flood, considering how the landscape is. I mean, it seems like rocks has been thrown all over the place. There's seashells on top of the highest mountains. And then also you find that.
Well, can I real quick before you go on, can I just address that one point right there?
Okay.
So if the scenario you just painted had happened, as we know, water runs downhill, always seeks out its level, and if it's at the top of a mountain, it runs down the mountain. So if seashells were at the top of mountains because there was a worldwide flood, when the waters receded, wouldn't the seashells have flowed down the mountains with the water?
Which they probably have, yes.
Well, you just said that they were found at the top of mountains, though.
Yeah, they were found on top of mountains, and they're found like at every level.
Not exactly, John. They wouldn't necessarily flow down the mountain. They'd still be there, and the reason that they're there is because part of the world was flooded during the last ice age, which was far longer than 6,000 years ago.
Well, right, but the thing is, though, is the reason the seashells are at the top of large mountains is because of plate tectonics and upheaval of the crust.
Yeah, at the end of the last ice age, as the ice was melting, it's widely assumed by most scientists. I know I've researched this directly dealing with Matt Powell. It was widely assumed, but it's widely assumed by most scientists that there was a large melt off from our continent, North America, which actually raised the sea levels in that area of the world, which is how you have seashells on the top of Mount Everest.
Well, the Bible says that the mountains rose after the flood was almost done, and the sea started to sink. And so, with the
Bible says that the world was filled because of 40 days and nights of rain, correct?
Yeah, I don't think most of the water came from rain, though. I think most of the water came from the fountain of the deep, which shot up into the air, maybe 20 miles into the air. It was a great blast, and it was all around the world in the cracks in the plate tectonics.
So we know that there's no there's underground lakes, sure, but there's no level, as most young Earth creationists maintain, of water. There's not enough water in the world to do what you're saying.
Well, if you brought all the mountains down and the bottoms of the oceans up and everything was level, the water would be 1.5 miles deep. There's plenty of water on the Earth.
Actually, let me respond to that. Okay, I saw a graphic not too long ago, sometime in the last couple of years. Now, people often get it wrong when they talk about. I hear people say the Earth is 70% water. That's not true. The Earth
surface,
the 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water.
Yeah.
Now, this graphic I saw, it showed the Earth, and then in the shape of a sphere next to the Earth, it showed all the water on Earth, including the ice, the oceans, every drop of water.
Yeah.
The Earth itself was the size of a grapefruit. The water that the Earth held was the size of a green pea. So there's not as much water as you think on the Earth. I mean,
well, if you look at it that way, but if you just look at the surface and you level the whole surface, there'd be a mile and a half of water, and that's pretty well established. And another thing, on top of the mountains, if you've seen the fossils, they're all buried in a small area, and there's clams in the small area. And obviously, they were buried quickly, catastrophically, because they're all closed. And clams, when they die, by Lake Erie, you should know that they open up. And so if it was a slow death there on the top of the mountains, they all would be opened up and they wouldn't be together. And they went into a little dugout area or something that was there in the area for whatever reason. And they were all buried there rapidly, and they didn't get a chance to open up.
And another thing, every fossil that we have of dinosaurs is because of a flood. Like you cannot have dinosaur bones or fossils if they died from natural causes or anything that would require thousands of years, because they would, of course, eventually disintegrate. Worms, bugs, all these different things will, take apart their flesh and also their form. And the shifting earth, weather, earthquakes, all these things would move their body parts, into different parts. I mean, of course, we do find bones separated in many places, but most of the dinosaur bones that we have whole, they should not be that way if there was no flood that just put like mud, pounds of mud, I mean thousands of tons of mud on top of them, causing them to be preserved as like some kind of cement, I guess shaping around them.
So a deluge of water doesn't necessarily mean that's going to cause a preservation event, right? Because you could look at like the La Brea tar pits is a perfect example of us having full specimens that there doesn't need to be any water for that. It's all tar, right? So if you're trying to conclude that there needs to be a large deluge of water that's killing off animals, that's also causing some type of preservation event, right? Then you need to propose a mechanism by which this preservation is happening that's contingent upon this deluge of water. Because you can say that at any point in time, especially if it's muddy, anything that gets caught in a mud pit or a sinkhole is going to be preserved naturally because it's already under sea level.
Yeah, so that's what we're saying, that once you bring in a flood, you bring in mud. And
there's mud without floods, though, correct?
Huh?
And I think there was tsunamis. There were mudslides more than a flood. When you think about the rains came up and the floods came down, whatever, rains came down and the floods came up. It was massive flow from these jets that were coming up, the fountains of the deep. And actually, there's a guy who they've gotten all the drilling data from oil drills on North America. Now they're doing it around the world, but they can see that all the sediment that's on North America all flowed from east to west, and it wasn't laid down by rain. That would show that, and it's all, and they could see, and it all went east to west at a certain level, and then all of a sudden, these mountains start going up, and they are at a different level, and it's just really amazing. If you think this happened rapidly, which I do, that not real rapidly, within days there were 3 or 4 layers laid down, and you have it at the east where just the heavy stuff is laid down, but you go by the Grand Canyon, you have these amazing thick layers, and those layers only come when you have a great deal of sediment and it finally starts to slow down. Then it will sort itself out. And so there's 3 or 4 layers laid at each time in the Grand Canyon area. And I love going out west. I like going out east because I can see that it was going fast then, just the heavy stuff got buried. Then you go out to the Grand Canyon to see, it's amazing, and you don't know it, but all the way to the top of the Grand Canyon there's sea creatures in there, and I'm like, when the river start digging in?
When you talk about the water flowing, though, wouldn't what Nakasuchi brought up a few minutes ago explain that at the end of an ice age, once the ice melted?
It would have gone from south to north, though, I would think, and not east to west.
Why? It would go with the contour of the land. It wouldn't. Why would it necessarily go south to north?
Just because it melts.
Not to mention, geologists mainly maintain. I did a stream on this not too long ago. Mainly maintain that topography of the Earth did not come from one big flood. That's has been proven since the mid 17th century. There is debate whether or not large floods can affect the topography, but geologists have completely dismissed any global flood event. Not to mention, all the modern sciences pretty much go against what both of you are trying to say here.
Okay, where do they think all the sediment that's covering the world? 70% of the world, I think 75, is covered with sediment, and it's several layers, and it's several different thicknesses, and that's a lot of sediment. Sediment is rock that is eroded away and then becomes mud and is carried by water and then laid down by water. And so a lot of problems with the geologists are they are looking for one layer that the flood caused, but I say all the layers almost were caused by the flood, and there were post-flood problems and issues, and the ice age, I believe, is post-flood, and that caused certain geological formations. But I think most of the fossil record is and the sediment layers all point to the flood of Noah.
So there's a few issues here that we all do know that sediments can form without water, right? Erosion happens without water, and it can happen. It actually actively happens in California without water.
Well, it's sedimentary rock. I guess that isn't hardened, perhaps. I guess
sediments and sedimentary rock. I mean, if we want to start getting into the classifications of different rock layers, I think that's bringing in a whole nother issue there with their ability to weather and the time frame and what conditions. But if we're talking about just separate layers forming of loose compacted rocks,
they form very slowly, and they don't have those thick layers when it goes like that. And I think the layers from the flood, the reason they harden so is because there's calcium and salt in heavy amounts in the water that came from under the earth, and when you have salt and calcium, it'll turn into solid rock like we see the sedimentary rock in the United States right now and around the world. And not right now, if you see mud and it withdraws from Lake Erie after it's so high right now, but if it withdraws, you'll see the different layers, and it doesn't look anything like the Grand Canyon, and it doesn't stay hard.
Boy, I wish I was high right now.
Yeah, so I don't think it's supposed to look like the Grand Canyon, especially if it's not the type of material, right? We can't expect igneous rock to look like, some type of, quartz or some type of sand, right? Because each of these layers have different compositions, even though the majority of the Earth's surface is silicon dioxide, right? Different compositions, different elements would change their ability to be compacted, and again, whatever conditions, whether it be moist or arid, would also be a contributing factor. But none of that states that we have to always have some type of great deluge of water in order to have compacted layers. At no point.
Well, let me ask you this, Dragnauct, because I know little about it. It sounds like you and Nakasuchi know a lot more about it than I do. But is it true what they're claiming, that the geological strata, the different layers that are laid down, have to be as a result of water? No geologist believes that, do they?
No, but if you look at what happens in California with their natural erosion of their mountains, it's traditionally known that California is incredibly arid, but somehow you have the erosion still going on. Now, it does rain there, but when's the last time you've seen a flood happen in California, right? So I get that, there is, and here's kind of the problem that I have with a lot of young earth creationists. They have a conclusion and they're trying to work backwards to try and find evidence for it, but that's not how you do science. As somebody who does science, that's not how you do science at all. You start with an observation then you start working towards experiment.
That's what good science is about. But let's take the internal fusion of the sun. And they started with the idea, we got to find something that makes the sun billions of years old. And they found internal fusion, and they never looked at the evidence and said that they projected it on the sun. And it was not based on good science. And Darwin... What's that?
Who is they? Who is they that you're talking? I don't know who they is.
The ones who came up with the internal fusion model.
Okay, that doesn't really tell me much. There's a nameless, ageless, degreeless scientist named they who makes claims, and I'm not sure if that is even an accurate depiction of how that came about.
That's how it came about. Just go ahead and Google the beginnings of internal fusion, and they were just looking for age. And
well, I mean, isn't that like?
Calvin was
the accepted science of what the sun is. It's like it's just a fusion reaction. I mean, that's what it is, right?
Oh, they can't reproduce it on Earth. They can't go inside the sun. They can't get within millions of miles of the sun.
Wait, hold on. You never fused hydrogen molecules together?
They do that all the time, and they do it in plasma. And
we can't reproduce it. You just said that.
What's that? I said
you can't reproduce what happens on the sun, which is
they have chain reaction fusion, and we can't reproduce chain reaction fusion. We have a football size.
So this is exactly the other YEC thing that Maddie, who is a nuclear engineer, debunked when she came on my channel. I mean, this is kind of hilarious that you now hit the second argument.
Huh.
I mean, you do realize, even though we can't go to the sun, that the energy that the sun puts off can be analyzed, and they can determine, the composition of the sun and what's going on there without actually going to the sun.
We found out a lot more about the sun recently from that time, and now we know that the power comes from the corona. The corona is 1,200 miles above the sun, and the corona is made up of plasma, and so they came up with a new idea. Fusion must cause plasma. So isn't that amazing? And so where's all this plasma come from? And this is what's powering it, because the surface temperature of the sun is 6,000 K, and the inside the corona, it's 1 to 2 million K. So all the power is coming from there. And actually, I think there's fusion going on in the corona, which is the same way we do it on Earth. Actually, when we do it, we set it inside of plasma when we do it with the bombs, or when we do the particle colliders. And so the sun, all the power comes from there. And NASA recently, this is another topic that I'm working on right now for another debate, but they knew that the corona was fed by plasma, and so they, on the Voyagers, they put these devices that they could detect plasma, and now they're in intergalactic space, and there's still plasma out there. So I believe that the universe is full of plasma, like Nikola Tesla thought, Plato thought, Isaac Newton thought. And the problem with plasma is they can't explain how it got there, because for you to make plasma, just take a teaspoon of salt and make it plasma. It takes a lot of energy to heat it up to that point.
I mean,
so they can't explain why it got there, and it changes the speed of light in the universe.
It's kind of the thing about the universe. So there's a lot in the universe that we can't explain. Like I don't even know, like half the shit you just said just is like like great to me. But so what do you think the sun is?
I think that the sun is basically the plasma on the outside is the one that's generating the power, and that's fed from plasma in the universe. And the sun itself has to be some kind of an iron ball that creates these great magnetic fields around it that causes the
what? It's an iron ball.
I'm just using that as an example. I don't know what it's made of because we don't have any idea, but it's something that caused these great magnetic fields to generate the plasma to go to the glow mode and to the arc mode on the outside in the corona. And so that's why we have the ionosphere. That's made out of plasma, and that's because we have a fairly weak magnetic field. And what causes that? The iron inside. Well, iron's a big problem. They don't know what really causes a magnetic field. It's like a big magnet.
You can actually generate weak magnetic fields by actually simulating how.
No, they can do it. Well, they can do it with electricity. Electricity going through makes a magnetic field, and they say,
Cameron, let Dragnauct finish though. Let him.
Okay.
You're saying a lot. You're saying a whole. We're going off on every tangent available. So you can actually generate a weak magnetic field. It's actually very simple. You could take a piece of ferrous metal and pass it through a cardboard tube, and actually measure the magnetic electromagnetic waves that comes off of that, or a piece of PVC pipe. Just take a piece of ferrous metal and pass it through there, and you can generate that. So
okay, the problem is they think that the iron inside the earth is magnetized and it's flowing, but when the iron becomes hot enough to be able to flow, it loses it's no longer magnetic.
So a ferrous compound can lose its ability to become magnetized, right? But if it's in constant motion and it's being heated, it's going to continuously generate that magnetic field. That's why we have rotation. But the liquid core that on our planet, right, that contains tons and tons of ferrous compounds, helps generate that magnetic field, right?
But it just doesn't work. They have tried it with models. They've tried it with huge models. Well, maybe.
What do you mean it doesn't work?
Highs.
I'm trying to understand. I've done it myself.
They put the ferrous metals, as you call them, and heat them up in the center and try to reproduce a magnetic field, and it just doesn't work.
I have created magnetic fields. I literally just said that.
How hot was the ferrous metal?
Yes. Iron is a ferrous metal.
How hot was it?
It didn't have to be hot.
Okay, inside the earth it is. So I want to reproduce
I'm aware of that. That's why we have a more powerful magnetic field. The constant movement and the heat and the pressure creates a different type of field.
And it doesn't work when they try to reproduce it in labs.
So what lab failed to reproduce it? What specifically?
I don't know. I've seen several that have tried.
So name them.
I can't off the top of my head.
Okay, so that you see kind of the issue with me taking this on face value?
Yes, I've seen it on the History Channel. I've seen it when I Google it. I've seen it on websites. I've seen it.
Cameron, the Drag's question to you was, can you see how he has a tough time taking what you're claiming on face value because you have no data to back it up?
Yes. I have research that I have done.
Okay.
And it's a big problem.
Well, it's a problem, but I'm still waiting on like who is doing these experiments, how are they failing, and it's odd that I was able to generate a magnetic field with little to no heat by passing a piece of ferrous metal through a tube.
Yeah, it's just that the way it is and the amount that there is, and just with this hot metal that's inside the earth that just doesn't work when they tried to do the experiments and heated it up to where they think it is or anywhere near it. Once it gets to the liquid form, the iron loses its property that's magnetic.
So liquid metal loses its ability to generate magnetic fields?
Yes.
Okay, your evidence is?
Research.
Which it comes from?
From my research.
Your research that comes from what lab, what researcher?
I've just done it over the years. I've been studying this for years.
Okay, cool.
When you say research, though, are you talking about looking things up on Google?
YouTube videos. It's YouTube videos, right?
YouTube, Google. I've seen it on TV. I saw the first time I heard about that. It was on the History Channel, actually. So.
I mean, the History Channel does kind of say that aliens are your god, right?
Well, this is when the History Channel used to do science and history.
But here's the thing. Okay, so Google, YouTube videos, you've seen it on TV. Now, here you have Dragnauct, who is in college right now, who said he's done actual experiments that produced magnetic fields. And, somebody who's actually done it right here on the panel. And
you can do it with electricity. You got magnetic fields just through the cord to your computer.
So I think what generally what we're just doing what atheists do. We're just asking for citations. Young Earth creationists, they make claims, but and then they attack specific points of scientists. But Drag pointed it out actually perfectly well. Like the whole model, and it started with the stupid ass book way back in the '60s. Is to start with your conclusion and work your way backwards and look for evidence to fit that conclusion, and then ignore all the evidence that goes against that conclusion. And that's just not science.
That's what Darwin did. Exactly what Darwin did. I appreciate that. I agree 100% with that.
Well, sure. So I want whoever is hosting right now, can you screen share what I have up on my screen?
I sure can.
Okay. Can you read that headline for me, Cameron?
Focus, molten metal magnet.
Okay. So a tank-stirred liquid sodium generates a magnetic field, even though it's highly turbulent, a condition closer to real dynamos in planets, stars, and galaxies, but harder to simulate in the lab. So it seems as though we've been able to actually do this with some difficulty, but it's actually done. And that's why I specifically asked you if they've actually done it. Like,
and
this
they
actually describes them doing that.
Yeah, they had some real difficulty, and it really doesn't make the magnetic fields that we see.
They had difficulty achieving it, but they achieved it.
I don't think they did.
It literally says that here in the first sentence.
And I mean, you do understand that technology improves. We gain more knowledge as we gain time. This whole. Oh gosh, it's so silly. It's kind of funny. Thank you, Drag.
So yeah, I'll read a little bit here too.
Okay.
Lab experiments have generated fields in a similar way, and in the 26 January Physical Review letters, researchers report that they can create the self-sustaining magnetic field even when the flow is highly turbulent.
Okay.
So that flies in the face of what you just told us.
They don't really make great magnetic fields. They get some magnetic fields.
That's not what you said earlier. You said that they couldn't do it. You didn't say a weak field. You didn't say a difficult field. You said that they could not do it.
Well, and this is the problem you're going to run into, Cameron. And this is the problem with your method. You're starting with the conclusion and you're working backwards. So, well, the problem with that, and you said so yourself, that you've been researching this for several years.
Yeah.
Well, is that technology improves and we end up doing what the thing that you claim science can't do. This has been the problem with young Earth creationists all the time. And it's why your arguments keep changing about every 5 or 6 years.
Well, I think that's a broad, a statement. I mean, everyone is actually working with assumption and then working back from it. You just won't admit it. That's the difference.
So when I'm working in my lab and I'm doing research on trying to find a hypothetical gene, right, that performs a function. So explain to me how in my area of research I'm doing that.
Well, assuming that it's possible that it exists.
I know that it exists because we found the same gene in pea plants that's monofunctional rather than bifunctional.
Okay, so then how is there a comparison?
Because you're saying that other people are doing this, right? You're saying that other people who are in these fields are doing the same thing. And that's why I asked you how I'm doing it in my field.
Well, yeah, okay. So then pointing out an area that you're not doing it does not dismiss the areas that you are doing it.
So what areas am I doing it in?
Okay, assuming that there is no God, or just that that if there is a God, you cannot prove it.
How do you do that under methodological naturalism?
Well, that's the thing. You can't use methodological naturalism. If you're assuming that there is a God, then you have to assume that there is something beyond the naturalism that you can actually see.
So you're asking, you're implying that people are committing this same type of I guess, methodological error, right? And
it's not an error.
Entire time
you do.
Well, okay, something we do or error, whatever, a behavior. The same behavior across the board, everyone's doing it. But we're exclusively talking about methodological naturalism in reference as to how we go about investigating a claim. But now you introduce something that can't be investigated under the purview of this system. And then there's a problem. Well, obviously, it's not subject to that system. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. So, for example, if I cannot, like, without a shadow of a doubt, prove that other universes exist beyond what we can see. I mean, if I even come up with the assumption that there are other universes, I can still work my way back from that and just say, okay, if there are other universes that out there, then these things will be true. And then I can look for the evidence. That's what we do all the time. If we, yeah, that's.
Well, if I would say no, just like Drag, but if you're going to do that, then you have to acknowledge the evidence that goes against it as well. And that's one thing that you young earth creationists refuse to do.
Right. You can make an observation of a phenomenon and be ambivalent towards it and then find evidence to push you in a direction, right? You can hold things provisionally. I think there's just this assumption that everyone, like, for some reason, is, I guess, more prone to confirmation bias than others, which can be true, but you can only say that for certain people in certain scenarios, right? I wouldn't generalize that.
Well, sure, but just like young earth creationists, I mean, atheist, everyone, we all could be actually persuaded either direction. That's why there are young earth creationists who become old earth creationists or atheist or whatever. And there's atheists who become creationist or young earth creationist or Christian. So, I mean, it's an individual thing sometimes. But to say that young earth creationists do not look at the evidence and is persuaded by the evidence either direction. I mean, come on, that's just, you're making us look like we're brainless people.
Well, so the issue is I've never come across a young earth creationist that's actually understood scientific information, right? I've come across many who have misinterpretations of what they think science is and how science is conducted. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. I'm dead serious. All the time that I've been studying science, I've yet to come across one that actually understood methodological naturalism, that understood anything about the demarcation between science and non-science, like any of the philosophical trappings of how the enterprise of science is actually done.
Okay, well, I would have to be a scientist as you to prove that you actually understand it yourself. So, I mean, I'll have to take your statement by face value, because if you don't understand it and you think you understand it, then what you think other people got wrong is meaningless.
Because I can demonstrate that, though. I could easily demonstrate, just like I demonstrated that what Cameron stated was wrong. That's easy. Again, I'd personally performed that experiment myself, and I could instruct other people on how to do it and how to test to see if magnetic waves are actually produced, right? So it has a little to do with somebody's perspective, but what's demonstrable.
True, but okay, proving where you got one thing right does not disprove that you can't get a lot of other things wrong.
No, that's not what I was saying. I was demonstrating one example. The separation between someone's perspective and someone's position would be evidence, would be something that you can actually demonstrate. In this case, empirical evidence.
Yeah. Okay. So empirical evidence that you can show here and now. That's one thing. But then talking about things that happened, millions of years ago, or like just trying to piece together a theory and then say it's fact. I mean, that's a whole nother story.
That's a part of the enterprise, though. Like
that's not all one. That's not all one sheet. I mean, things are divided, and you have to understand. Okay, so some things are degrees of credit. I guess degrees of how believable they are, and like you could actually piece together how demonstrable your theory is based on how you can show it now, because you can actually go to the lab and show it and actually see step by step each moment how these things are coming to be as you claim your theory would show in reality. But when it comes to history and talking about things that happened millions of years ago, you have like tiny pieces of evidence that you're just creating a whole story and movie about.
And I see what you're getting at here. So the issue here is that there's this presumption that there's a difference in how science is conducted when you have let's say, the separation, we'll call it that, between the physical sciences that happen in the lab versus a more investigatory science, such as trying to determine the rate of mutation for an extinct species and its extant cousins, right? That actually takes a little bit of the philosophy of science on how one would come to certain conclusions. But we have to keep something in mind here. It's all provisional, right? Because obviously, we were not there. Absolutely. Everyone acknowledges that. Yet, when you understand how biology works, when you understand how chemistry works, there is a certain consistency to it. And from there, you draw inferences. And I think this is kind of where it loses many people, because if I know the decay rate of this particular isotope, that's my metric that I can use to count how old something is. And so when we start to get into stuff like that, we start like dating fossils and trying to determine this mutation versus that mutation, right? That takes a little bit of math, that takes a little bit of inference, that takes a little bit of know-how.
A lot of assumptions.
And not really, right? Because I can determine the rate of mutation given the appearance of this mutation in any given population, such as the I don't know. Oh, here's a good one: the arrival of the allele that gives people pheomelanin, right? All the different shades and pigments of human beings, that has a date on it. That actually arose, a few tens of thousands of years ago, if not more. But we can actually calculate that given what's in our own genes now.
I would calculate it right around the Tower of Babel, and the people with darker skin do better in very sunny places, and people with light skins probably would go to Europe or somewhere, so where they wouldn't get the skin cancer and eye cancer.
That's not really how that works, but it has to do with the
well, that's what the Bible would say, and I say that's a reasonable explanation. Just to say, 10,000 years ago, it must have got messed up with a.
Well, no, actually, it appeared in sub-Saharan Africa quite often. The issue is that women who had this particular mutation could not end up bearing too many children, because the funny thing about UVB radiation, it breaks down folate, and when you break down folate when you're pregnant, you lose the child. Like, you can't give birth. So that's kind of how that works. But it's creating a narrative based on a religious text, but not understanding the biology and the chemistry behind what's actually happening, is the huge separation here. Because I guarantee you knew nothing about the breakdown of folate from UVB radiation, right?
I don't know what causes the melanin to not produce, and it could be caused by different things, and what really caused it initially, metaphysically, we really don't know. It's another assumption.
Yeah.
But originally caused it metaphysically. I'm not sure what that statement.
So yeah, you keep saying assumptions. Has there been any proof that plants can grow on Earth without a sun?
Well, it doesn't have to grow, and if there's just one day after it was created, then it's not. The question is not about it being grown.
I'm just saying, we had plants before we had a sun, according to the creationist model, right?
Well, yeah.
Well,
so if you have
overnight too.
If you have another light source or a power source,
are we not assuming with the creationist model that all these years ago, 6,000, 7,000, however long you think it was, are we not assuming that God did it?
Well, yeah, because
with lack of evidence.
We're not assuming at the point where we believe God did it. So if God said that he was there and he was the light of the world or whatever, and the sustaining power of it, so then at that point it makes sense that of course the creation itself was powered by God. So you don't need a sun to do that, just like how you don't need a sun to actually.
How did you have light without the sun?
Well, you have God, just like the sun.
So God brought a strobe light?
No, he has his own power.
Well, I have my own theory on that if you want to hear.
I'm not really interested. I mean, I'm just trying to figure it out.
That's interesting.
So because you're saying that we have all these assumptions. So I'm an atheist. I don't necessarily believe in evolution. Actually, I'm often maintain that it's a possibility, and I think it's a far more likely possibility than, God created that massive thing that you was talking about, the sun. That thing is huge. God would have to be huge. I don't think that God just came with a strobe light. I don't think that plants can grow without the sun. And it's because I've experienced these things in my life. I haven't experienced angels. I haven't experienced God. What I have experienced is that a whole bunch of people that are smarter than me say that evolution, there's actual evidence for it. And I've studied some of that evidence. Guess what? One thing I've never studied in my entire life is actual evidence that God did it. So please, that's been my question. And we can get back to Drag, just really explaining science to you guys. But what is your evidence for this creation assumption?
Well, I haven't seen any evidence of things popping up out of nothing.
I mean, Cameron here literally says like mountains popped up overnight because of magic, right?
Because of God.
No, it's because of catastrophic plate tectonics were involved, and they slowly rose up, and the ocean slowly sunk, as the Bible said. I don't say that all of a sudden, boom, they popped up. It didn't happen that way.
Well, I mean, God, pretty much. All right, yeah, go ahead, John.
What scientists claim that things just popped into existence? You just said, Justin, that
okay, like dark matter.
But what scientists ever claim that dark matter just popped into existence?
They can't explain it, and they say that it's
someone not being able to account for something is not someone saying that it came out of nothing, right?
Well,
not having to account for something is not the same thing as me saying it spontaneously generated.
Wait. So the universe just having a Big Bang. Is there explanation for the Big Bang?
Yeah, there's cosmogony, right? So the study of cosmogony goes over how the Big Bang and the subsequent events that created the solar systems went about. That's not my particular area, but that's what I understand is the study that you can defer to for that. But are you looking for like what catalyst set it off?
Well, yeah, because if the moment you say that there's a beginning, then that means the beginning. There was something before that was not the beginning. That just sure. So then, like the moment you put a beginning somewhere, that's where you have like a timeless existence of nothing.
Realize that the Big Bang Theory does not include any claims about a beginning, because the Big Bang can only be traced back to I think it's a Planck length of time, after it began. And the theory is that there was a singularity out of which the Big Bang occurred, but we can't go past that. We don't know what was before that. Okay. So you're saying because we don't know what was before that occurrence, then it has to be some being with a mind that set it all off?
Well, no, I don't understand. How do you not know what's before that?
Because they can only trace it back to that infinitesimal amount of time after it started.
Wait, when you say infinitesimal, what do you mean by that?
Very, very, very small. Like they call it's a Planck length of time, it's
a certain measurement of time
it's
not like if you want me to relate it to seconds and minutes and stuff like that, I have to get I don't know what the calculation is, but there's a calculation for it.
It would be microscopic.
It's just more
of seconds.
No, in other words, there is no beginning at that point. You're just saying that it goes.
That's not the claim that there is no beginning. It's that we can only go back so far, okay, but we don't know what was before it. But not knowing what was before it, nobody knows what was before it. So when you try and claim that it had come from something, there's no evidence for that.
Well, we know that space-time continuum, they all had to come together at the same time. And what was there before? They say nothing. Was it empty space? No, they say there was nothing. And so how did it all explode? And what was the banger is a legitimate question. And metaphysics is just talking about the original
that's
cause.
A loaded question.
It's not even a question.
Yeah, well, it is kind of like... I would still haven't really heard like your evidence outside of what like the Bible or whatever that God did it.
Yeah, I keep hearing conclusions, right? I hear conclusions and I hear account, but I don't hear a way for me to actually say, okay, well, how did this entity, this being, this God, interact with the physical world to do any of the things that people are proposing, right? How can I actually determine that? If there's another system by which I need to study this other than just acquiescing to the claims, then I would love to hear that, because I've yet to hear anything.
I mean, we know that like it takes billions of years for the light that's coming, we see stars in the sky, and that light that's coming from those stars takes billions of years to get here. We know that like this universe is so much bigger than humanity ever thought, even 300 years ago, right? So billions of years for this light to get here. We know this.
Yeah.
Assumption.
Well,
no, we know it. I mean, we know it.
It's an assumption.
I might be a little different than
hold on a second. I want to see if I can understand the two of you a little bit better. Okay. So, of course, since you are young Earth creationists, you don't even believe the Big Bang theory is correct at all, right?
No. Well, I might be a little different from James here. I'm not a young universe creationist. I'm a young Earth creationist, which means I believe the Earth was created about, or at least the ecosystem of the Earth was created about 6,000 years ago. The universe could have been here for zillions of years, and all the light that has taken the time it took for the light to get across this universe, it probably had taken the time to get here. So when God did create this Earth in the middle of the stars with the lights, everything is showing, I mean, that was not a big issue for him. So that would answer.
That's very interesting. I've never heard that take on it, but
at least you have an out for that.
All right, and now my next question to the two of you is: are all the things that you believe, all the claims you've been making over this last hour and 20 minutes, is the source of all your beliefs biblical?
I would say mine is biblical. I think he would say that it's biblical too. That's why he's a creationist.
No, I go with science, and I've done a lot of research.
This last hour and 20 minutes, I honestly, it hasn't sounded like you go with science.
Okay, well, you have two choices as a metaphysical cause.
Cameron, slow your roll.
Okay, you have two causes as a metaphysical cause.
Cameron, please slow your roll, please. All right. Check it out. Okay.
There's two causes.
You have literally said at least 24 times. Well, the Bible says, when we have pressed you on, where these observations, these claims you're making come from.
Well, as a detective, I don't go into any investigation with any assumptions. If Justin's wife dies, I'm going to think he probably killed her, but I can't go in with that assumption because it's going to ruin my investigation. But as a biblicist, I believe the way the original modern science did, that the Bible is the queen of science, and what you do is you do your investigation, then go back and check and see if it's consistent with the Bible. And you can Google that, theology, the queen of science.
Well, what if you discover something scientifically and it's not consistent with the Bible? Do you then disregard it?
Well, you'd go back and go ahead and research it again and make sure you had everything right. And
research it again until it does coincide with what the Bible says?
No, until you find out you absolutely have the truth. And if it's wrong, then I'd look for a new model. And that's what I'd be doing right now if I was you, thinking about what Darwin did.
Hold on. But wait a minute. But if something is found to be true, can things be true without coinciding with what the Bible says?
The Bible is not a science book, and it doesn't have that much.
Wait a minute. You just said a minute ago the Bible is the queen of science.
That's what the early scientists, modern scientists, held, and that's what Harvard was started on. And that's just a way that they did it, but they didn't allow that to affect their investigation.
But will you answer my question directly?
Okay.
Okay. Are there truths out there about reality that do not coincide with what the Bible says?
I haven't found any.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say that if there are, they would be apparent or either paradoxical in some sense. Now, when it comes to trusting science, often it's confused with trusting scientists. Now, just like
that's true.
Now I don't trust science, just like how you don't trust the Bible. A person who is interpreting Earth itself and nature, they can misinterpret it, just like how a person can misinterpret the Bible. So, it could go both ways. And
I highly encourage you to actually look at the real science and don't trust scientists. You don't have to be a scientist to look at the evidence. Like I said, like I'm not an atheist that necessarily will sit here and say evolution is how it all happened. I look at possibilities, and I think evolution, based on the evidence that I've seen at least, is the most possible of the scenarios. I put God way back there. It's a possibility, but it's only a possibility because, theists have put it forth. But this whole notion, like, you're going to use a book that's 2,000 years old and base, not just science on it. Like this is good science if it complies with the Bible, but morality. And I just find that so confusing. I find it confusing in myself when I did it myself as a Christian 20 years ago. How do you place so much stock in a book so old, and why doesn't God update it and visit us now?
Oh, I love that question. Well, okay, when it comes to God, considering the fact that we as humans, we can only see through like two eyes, he has to give us, I guess, small dosages of information, because if he gives us too many things, then we overcomplicate it, as we are already, and we will spend too much time on the meaningless things rather than the most important thing, which is him. So living like him, or as holy as he is the most important thing, so that we can actually make it to the next step, which is to get in heaven and then actually study the universe even more in depthly. But that's the biggest reason why, because if you expect God to keep on updating like every possible information that we can know, we will never finish the book. We will never finish any subject, whether it's salvation, whether it's a grain of sand. We can go on forever, because this universe, it's made up from forever. It might be a bit metaphysical, but
but why? So all Christians speak about this personal experience that they have with God. Why put so much stock in a book written by I call them primitive peoples, but I understand that belittles them, and that there's very intelligent human beings using the technologies of their time. But compared to the knowledge that we have now, they had very little knowledge to go from, right? So why would you put so much stock in anything that they wrote and not just use what you can actually see with your own eyes? And that's pretty much what science has done over the years. Is we have used our ability to learn more and more and more. And if you compound that with 2,000 years since this book was written, right? Like, we have learned a lot since they wrote this book. Why put so much stock in it?
Well, if we believe that God is the one who inspired it, then it makes sense to believe the people who spoke from God. And because if he's God, then he would know better, even if it doesn't seem like it's the better way. Just like how any kid who pretty much.
What's your so you believe it came from God? What's your evidence it came from God?
Well, I mean, besides the fact that I have my
let me ask it this way. So if it had come from God, don't you think it'd be a little bit more accurate? Just speaking from morality's sake, don't you think that God would understand that maybe here at the beginning of time, people will be cool with slavery, and but maybe I shouldn't be cool with slavery because in 2,000 years, they're not going to like slavery too much, and yet this book is imperfect, right? So I mean, wouldn't it be a perfect book had it been truly inspired by God?
Okay, yes, it is a perfect book, I would say. But the issue is we're imperfect. So we misinterpret it, or not only that we misinterpret it, but our own history will twist, good things and make it, horrible. So, okay, this may sound controversial, but slavery in itself is not necessarily the evil thing. The evil thing is the abuse. Just like how, if
it's not evil to own a human being.
Well, yeah, just like how if I sign a contract for
I don't care about abuse. Like
the Bible doesn't authorize man stealing or owning people.
This is a whole other debate that I didn't really mean to get us sidetracked. I was just asking questions about the Bible because it's pretty much what I heard was, and I did step away for a minute because I'm drinking hot tea. So I made some hot tea, but what I came back and heard was basically no, that science, like if it doesn't if the science doesn't relate to what the Bible says, then dismiss it. Maybe I did come right in when I was hearing that. So maybe
let me give you an example. Darwin came up with the idea. Well, there's actually the story came all the way from the Sumerians and the Egyptians and the.
Yeah, I mean, you understand that Darwin didn't come up with evolution.
Yeah, he didn't come up with his grandfather came up with his research. So anyway,
that's not true.
If you take that story and look at the Bible, say no.
What was his name? Was it Masterson? I think I can't remember the dude's name, but it was like another.
Wallace was another guy who had the idea too, but
like Darwin never even heard of evolution, and
he
realized that his life's work proved the theory of evolution.
His grandfather had the whole idea. He didn't get a new idea at all. All his ideas came from his grandfather.
I'm willing to grant all of that, everything in the whole kit and caboodle. The fact that someone came up with an idea and led to the current incarnation of this theory does not invalidate. Like I'm still
okay. So the Bible says everything has its own kind. There's different categories. That's like type or family.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay. You just said magic word. You said kind.
Before we go into a whole rant. You have a habit of doing that. Define to me what a kind is. Don't give me an example. Define what a kind is.
A kind is one that could have offspring with the others in the kind, basically.
So an animal that can breed with another creature and produce offspring.
Yes, that's basically the kind. And so if you have a theory that goes against this idea that they could somehow come from a common ancestor, different kinds, you'd say time to look for a different story.
Real quick. Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, hey guys, sorry I'm late. I mean, one issue I take with that definition that he just provided is you're re-invoking the word kind to explain the definition of a kind. So the way you defined kind was a kind is a type of animal that can reproduce with its own kind or something to that nature.
Basically, and science has types and families
and
species.
Before you say that, if I'm asking you what a kind is and you're using the word kind to revalidate it, that doesn't tell me like what particularly I should see in a kind, does it? Like, if I'm describing to you a kind of bird.
So a perfect example I love to use. What kind is a platypus?
Well, whichever it could mate with, and it would be part of that kind and have offspring.
Okay, but is that kind a eutherian mammal? Is that kind a bird? What is the kind? What category can I place it into? So that I can look for other things and say, oh, that's not part of that kind, or oh, that is part of the kind.
You're just trying to make me put
I'm genuinely interested in this endeavor of yours. I'm genuinely interested.
There's a reason Immutable's asking that question, because that definition does nothing for me. If I were to say that,
call it family then. The scientific term family.
Well, members of a family don't all interbreed.
Okay.
It can be like let's say I said vertebrate, right? There's vertebrates that breed, like we're vertebrates, right? But we can't breed with donkeys,
right?
So like if you're using the ability to reproduce as the metric here. So reproductive success is the metric. That was sort of done away with because we can't force every animal that looks like this to have sex, right? So there's kind of a limitation of defining something that way. And that's why we don't do that. We use genetics.
And real quick, just to clarify, give you another example of what Immutable was just saying. When you defined kind, it was tantamount to you saying, defining the word blue and saying blue are things that are blue.
Yeah, that's a good way to define it. I agree.
That's not a good way to define it. That's not informative.
All right. So basically, you cannot define something with its own definition.
Yes, because it has nothing to do. If I made up a doodle flop, right? And a doodle flop is something that looks like a doodle flop. Do you know what a doodle flop is?
You just said it, a doodle flop. Like, I don't know.
So you don't know. You still have no idea. If you were to explain what a doodle flop is to somebody else, you wouldn't be able to really tell them anything other than it looks like a doodle flop.
Yeah. So I take your point that he used the word kind to define kind. So anyway, but when it comes to, I guess, the Bible's definition of, things producing after its own kind, we would just have to look at the kinds and say, okay, are we talking about mammal kind? Are we talking about dog kind or whatever.
All,
And then
all
from that,
mammals can't
So if
all
you
mammals-
cut,
Hey, I mean,
okay,
Hold on, Cameron, you just jumped on me, man. You
go
gotta,
go ahead, John.
you gotta maybe try some less caffeine or something, there, buddy. But I
Caffeine
love
is
you,
good,
man.
John.
I love your spirit, man. Look, all mammals can't reproduce with one another, though.
yeah, so we have to target the point on which kind or category that we're talking about, or at least we're thinking. So if we're talking about as far as species kind, then we start from there, and then we
Yeah.
assume that that's what God is talking about.
And so if you came up with a story like fish evolved into reptiles and reptiles evolved into mammals and mammals evolved into different humans. And I believe that there's like 300 different breeds of dogs, but they all came from 2 original dogs. There's like 30 different kinds of chickens. They came from 2 chickens. And are they related to some other bird? Perhaps. I don't know.
That's a bad example. All dogs, all common Canis familiaris are all the same species.
yes, they're all derived from ancestral wolves.
So the issue here is that when Justin was trying to describe what kind they were talking about, he used cladistics to actually define it, right? So that defeats the purpose of referring to a kind if you're just going to use cladistic labels. You get my point?
You said species kind.
Yeah, that makes no sense. So why not just say species, right? It's not, almost sounds redundant the way that it's being used, because how does kind modify the word species?
We have subspecies and species, and I'd say it's higher than species.
Well, no,
Sure, but again, you're already using cladistics to do that.
It's the way that Justin wanted to use this, right? Because he used kind as an adjective right there. So how does the word kind act as an adjective for the word species?
Yeah, okay, so kind is species.
Okay, so they're synonymous then. So kind means species.
Yeah, I mean, they're not totally synonymous, but kind is a bigger umbrella of the term species.
Okay, so it encompasses, from what it sounds like, a paraphyletic clades almost. That's what it. And I'm trying to refer it to something that I'm familiar with, because this seems really vague. So if I say, watch this. So immutable. Can you name within mammalia a monotreme?
Platypus.
Thank you. So I'm specifically identifying something within a subgroup, and he has correctly identified exactly what I was getting at. So if I say, well, name something within this group that spans a few different other groups, right, with this vague definition, how can we be on the same page with what you're actually trying to identify?
Well, I would assume that if we're talking about a certain species or a certain kind, at least the Bible only has the term kind, because there is no term species in the Bible. So
Did have it.
So then if we're
3,500 years ago. So
yeah, so if we're talking about the species, then we were talking about the line that it's coming from, at least from the main point, the genesis or the prototypes. And then from that point on.
Okay, but I mean, that also, I don't want to cut you off, right? But I mean, that raises the point. So are you referring to the most so for instance, like if you were to say like mammalian kind, right? Are you choosing one particular like phyla of mammals like to represent a mammalian kind, or are you referring to the most recent common ancestor of all mammals? Like from which all mammals were derived, right? So from the fossil record and from like genomic sequencing and things like that, we can tell there's a point in time where mammals did not exist, but then at some point they began to come into exist. Like we can see features that are gradually becoming more and more mammalian, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. So if we're starting off with the Bible, right?
No,
rather than a geological record, which could be explained with the Bible. If we're starting with the Bible, there's already several animals that Adam is counting, or at least naming. So from there, there's
right. And so I'm asking you, right?
Yeah.
Are the types of animals that are being described, are they the most recent common ancestors of the species you're trying to name?
The most recent? No, I would say they're the furthest kind. They're the ones at the back, from which all the animals we see.
He's saying so Adam is counting the progenitors. That's what he's trying to say.
Pretty much. And
Okay, great. That's
from those.
Hey, real quick. So Nakasuchi brought something up a little bit ago that I'd like to discuss before we run out of time tonight. And my apologies to Immutable for not noticing that you wanted in here sooner. You were sending me messages, and Drag sent me messages, different, in the internal chat and through Discord, and I didn't see him until a few minutes ago. But one quick question, and then the other subject that Nakasuchi brought up, I'd like to talk about a little bit before we close out for tonight. But and I don't really want to go all the way down this rabbit hole. I'm just curious after listening to Justin and Cameron, share their beliefs with us. Cameron, is the Earth a sphere?
You could describe it that, but it's not actually a sphere. It's a kind of different shape, but it's close to being a sphere, but it's not a sphere.
Okay, so you don't think the world's flat then?
No.
Okay, Justin, same question.
No, it's not flat.
Okay, all right. I'm so, you don't know how heartened I am to hear you guys answer that question that way.
Cameron was looking for oblate spheroid.
That's it.
Right. Yeah. So Nakasuchi, when he was addressing one of your points, maybe about 10 minutes ago, and he brought up the subject of morality.
Yeah, I'd rather talk about that.
Well, and I'd like to talk about it, because
Okay.
you guys, like I asked Cameron,
Okay.
like I asked Cameron a few moments ago about whether everything he believes is of biblical origins. I think we established that everything that he claims and believes is of biblical origins, because I asked him, are there truths out there that do not coincide with the Bible? And I don't remember his exact answer, but it amounted to, no, there are no truths out there that do not coincide with the Bible.
There's certain things like I eat shrimp, and the Bible kind of says don't eat shrimp, but it was at the time the Israelites were called to be different, and part of their God worship in other cultures was eating shrimp, so they were denied to eat shrimp, but we can eat shrimp now.
Okay.
So that also kind of leads me to ask a similar question.
Hold on a second, Immutable. Since it's been established that both of you guys derive your beliefs from the Bible, how is it that you can derive your morality from the Bible? And you, Justin, you said you wanted to talk about this, so I'll let you answer the question first.
Okay. Well, at least understanding that the Bible, God, he wrote his ideals from the beginning. He made man and female together to be married, to be in harmony. Of course, our quest in trying to read the Bible is trying to be in harmony with each other and also with God. So, everything that God did, he did it in context of the time, and then also knowing how things could be if we don't follow the rules in the best way possible. So there's situations where like he laid down laws that was best for that time. And then there's other laws that are timeless, and knowing which one, like which one is a timeless law versus a temporal law is what would make a biblical scholar a scholar. And that is how I derive my morality. I read the Bible, understand what was going on in that context, and understand why God had to make those rules. Then also I understand which principles are laws that are timeless and is meant for all time for a timeless reason. So
I just want to something you just said. So you're saying that certain laws that God laid down, he considered the cultural practices, the societies that existed at that time, and some of those laws that he laid down are no longer relevant because he was dealing with things as they were.
Yeah.
Okay. Why would the creator of everything have to concern itself with cultural practices of its creation?
Well, part of the reason, the big reason, is that God doesn't want to raise lazy-minded people. He wants them to actually learn on their own and build their culture, build their technology on their own without him just pressing the easy button, and they just know it. So whatever advancement that they understood or knew, whether they built houses with mud and bricks, or whether they was used to just using camels versus cars, you gotta sit there and say, okay, well, this is how you guys live. So with this kind of dynamic, I'm gonna make some laws that would fit this situation, and then let you guys build from there. And then there's other things such as like because of the economic system that they had back then, you know, they would eventually use slaves, or we won't call them slaves today. We may call them, you know, pretty much indentured servants. We may have people who are in debt, and then we just have them work, you know, for some business. They may be contractually owned by some company, whatever. But he had those backup systems there that were not meant to be abused.
What is your historical proof of any of the things you're saying right now?
I'm also curious, and this is, I won't do it now, but now I have a question about that.
Well, I would say the Bible says there's nothing new under the sun. So you think we have activities that are going on in today's culture that weren't part of the cultures in the past is just not true if you go ahead and look into it. And the Bible says, the fool says that there is no God. And actually, Nabal is a Hebrew word, and that means moral fool, not an intellectual fool. And in the New Testament, it says they've suppress the truth in their unrighteousness, that because they don't like the rules of God, basically. And God's got certain rules. He wants you to go with have a wife and one wife. And we got stories with Solomon having 1,000 spouses and concubines and everything. So there's nothing new. And but big problem is they reject the morality of God for a lot of atheists.
All right, this is a big debate that we're not going to have time to do. But you made a claim that we wouldn't recognize the slaves of Israel from 2,000 years ago as slaves today in our society. That they'd be poor people, they'd be in debt to people, but that's just not true. Slaves in Israel 2,000 years ago had less rights than I would say prisoners have, because you know, a guard could actually lose his job for just beating the shit out of a prisoner for not doing something, to where there were strict rules in the Bible about what you could do to slaves. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue that the treatment that the slaves in Israel compared to the treatment as, say, slaves here in America. But I am going to argue that it was slavery, that it wasn't right, it wasn't moral, and that we wouldn't consider it moral today.
Okay, so when I said that, you know, the slavery back then is not the same as the slavery we think of today, as such as, I guess, chattel slavery, or at least the slavery that was done to blacks and many other people throughout history. I'm saying that the slavery that they actually thought was ideal was a person comes work for a person till their debt is paid. That's ideally
how Jewish slaves were treated. Now, foreign slaves were a whole different matter. We have several verses from the Bible, and it would literally be a whole different debate, one that I've had with people that stand by this argument staunchly. But my point is, they were not commanded to whip them, they were not commanded to beat them or hurt them or do any kind of abuse. They were supposed to be
And
if the slave disobeyed, as long as they didn't beat them to death.
Well, you have to understand the culture of the time. At the time, it was you're authorized to kill your slave because they're your property. And now they introduced some new rules into it that weren't there before for more humane treatment. And hopefully, we've gotten better since then.
How about making women?
Well, I mean, you would
again. And again, why would a God? I just don't understand that. I mean, he sent the commandment down, thou shalt not kill, but you're saying that he made an exception because of the time that those people were living in, that they could kill their slaves?
He made an additional rule because they had gotten away from the idea of you shall not kill, and killing slaves was okay. So they said, no, you can maybe beat them, but you can't kill them. And if you kill them, you got to be killed. So you'd think twice before you start beating your slave.
Well, but it's okay if you beat them as long as they don't die.
Yes,
right. I mean, that's
a new idea.
And this is why I asked for any historical context, because, especially young Earth creationists, you like to use the Bible as history, and I don't actually agree that the Bible's history at all. I think that it's propaganda. I don't even maintain that the Old Testament is history.
How about Josephus?
But you guys use it as history. So when you then go and say the things that it says, it doesn't say it. It takes away from your whole argument how the Bible is a historical document.
Okay, so part of the issue is that we're talking and we're not looking into the text that you're saying that's not in the Bible, or we have to look into the Bible and then discuss what it says and doesn't say. Because right now sounds like we're just arguing over paraphrases and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, it is a whole other debate. And I am more interested in I mean, for one, this has been a relatively decent conversation that hasn't flown off the handle, which is odd for these kinds of conversations, I think. But yeah, I think that would be an interesting show to do in the future, because it is a whole other thing to where you really need to get into what the Bible actually says.
Yes.
Hey, real quick. Hey, Dragnauct, what's the link that you're putting in the internal chat?
Yeah, that's for people who are in here that want to go over to Athena's channel, because Athena wants to have an after show of some sort. So that's just for people in here. Now, if Athena wants to pass that link out to other folks, feel free. That's on Athena. But if Adventist, Hermes, Justin, you want to continue talking, Cameron, you want to continue talking, whoever else in here wants to continue talking, click on that, and there's going to be an after show right after this ends.
Okay.
Yeah, and I noticed that it doesn't show up in the internal chat to where you can just click on it.
Yeah, you got to copy and paste it.
Yeah, you got to copy paste it. Yeah, I just, I brought it up when, like I said, Nakasuchi had mentioned it, and I'm just very interested in how people come up with a moral framework from the Bible. I mean, without getting into any, specific verses. I mean, when I read the Bible, and I was a Christian for 35 years, but and reading the Bible is what contributed to me becoming an atheist. I think Nakasuchi has said the same thing. I've heard a lot of atheists say that as well. I mean, because when I read the Bible now as an atheist, and when I was a Christian, I didn't thoroughly read it. I listened to my preacher. I read the verses they pointed out. But once I read the whole thing, it just reads to me, it's the story of an immoral monster. Okay. And so it just interests me how people can claim that their moral framework comes from the Bible, because my contention is that the vast majority of people like you, of Christians like you guys, you're not really getting your moral framework from the Bible. You claim that you are, you think that you are, but when it comes out at the end of the day, you're really basing your moral framework on secular values. Because if you were truly basing your moral framework on the Bible, the world would be a raving, crazy hellscape every day, all day long.
I would love to just have a video on that one subject right there. If we were living our life based on the Bible versus secular, I guess, values, what would the world be? And when you said secular values, I think the same thing about secular people, that you're just borrowing of Bible principles,
yes,
and just claiming it's secular, and then you live your happy, harmonious life with it, when really it's the other way around. It's,
well, how I don't base my I know that I don't base my moral framework on the Bible. You know how I know that?
How?
Because I don't stone unruly children to death. I don't stone gay people to death. Hold on. I don't drown innocent children. I could go on and on. I mean,
but you do forgive people, right?
In some cases.
So at least you do have some moral framework from the Bible. Some.
And we have new revelation from Jesus Christ and a whole new way to live.
People were forgiving people before that Bible.
Well, yeah, and then I'm just but there's no reason for
That's
Not really.
a damn good point. Not really.
I mean,
What's your basis
So,
for
so
that?
I mean, so by your estimate, the world is 7,000 years old. So the Bible, the New Testament anyway, is 2,000 years old. So I don't see, like people.
Well, the Muslims are still holding grudges for the Crusades, so I think some people still hold grudges.
Yeah,
So
I've
you
heard-
referenced a new covenant. It basically is what you referenced a moment ago.
The
That
Muslims
things
still
change.
hold
That things changed when Jesus came along.
no.
How do you know? Well, how do you know which parts changed? Like you say, slavery's immoral now. Like, how do you know which parts of the Old Testament still hold true and which don't? How do you determine that?
I can answer that. Well, there's natural. Okay, there's laws of nature, such as the dietary laws that they use. That was based on nature, and then also there's moral laws, and then there's the civil laws, and then the national laws, which would somewhat civil. Everything that dealt with the national laws, as far as the Jews being God's people and the mission to fulfill what God called those people to do, those things were pretty much passed away. So having to go to Israel to do all these things, these sacrifices, those things aren't necessary. Now that we have a New Testament or a new will that Christ wants us to do, which is to preach the gospel to the entire world. Now we're not focused on one land. We're focused on saving the entire world, or at least preaching the gospel to the whole world. So when it comes to having a theocracy, such as making sure that our civilization is stable, whether how we pursue capital punishment, whether that's stoning gays or adulterers and all those things don't apply to Christians because we're not actually the governors, or like we're not having a theocracy. So that's why those laws that had to do with government, we don't practice those laws. And then when it comes to moral laws, such as,
Would you oppose a Christian government here in America?
I would, based on prophecy, really, mostly because of prophecy.
Well, theocracy. I think our republic, the idea of republic, came from John Calvin, and he wrote about the republic, and that's the republic we have. And our economics came from John Adams.
The concept of a republic came from who did you say?
Well, it originally came from the Greeks. The idea,
Okay,
it was modified. It was the republic we had came from John Calvin, where he modified it.
Okay.
All right. Wow. I mean, there's just so much. Yeah, I mean, I think we could have like 4 different live streams about the last 20 minutes alone, probably.
Yeah. Adam Smith was the one who got our economics, and he was a theologian.
The thing I do like about you guys, you're willing to talk, and it hasn't gotten hostile. We've been able to have a pretty good back and forth banter.
It hasn't
really been that crazy. Like I've had Sky out. I mean, it hasn't been that crazy.
It hasn't been hostile, but I have to admit I've broken about 12 pencils. I'm just kidding.
I get a little passionate. I'm sorry.
I personally won't be able to go to an after show, Athena, because I promised I'm gonna. I guess my VC in Discord is hopping, and I promised I'd pop in there, see what's going on. I don't have really too much longer. I have to go to bed early. I
got to get up at 4. So
yeah.
I as well am gonna head over to Discord for a little bit after the show. But yeah, all you guys, I don't know if you know Athena. They're good people. They have a small channel that if you took that link and went over there, you could continue the discussion. But I'm very interested in having you guys on again, and I would imagine Nakasuchi would love to have you on when he's doing a stream as well.
Yeah, give me a holler. I'll try to come.
And
it was you guys took my questions well, I thought, and you at least have answers for them. I haven't been able to really go back and watch streams quite as often as I used to, but I'm gonna have to make sure I do go back and watch this one because this was interesting. I enjoyed this conversation.
Hey, not to
Thank
pick on you guys, not to pick on you two, but here's a comment from a fellow Christian that's is on Knox channel quite a bit and has his own channel. He says the rhetoric from the Christians is killing me. They have such a twisted view of the Bible.
Oh, I could talk about the Bible all night.
Yeah, and if you guys are agreeable to it, may I give your emails to Richard Madsen, because he would love to have you on his channel as well. You know,
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
I'm Maurice.
Let's just go around the room here. And so, Nakasuchi, anything on the back burner coming up here real quick?
Yeah, I'm gonna be slightly reorganizing things. I've been putting out a lot of edited content. I'm gonna slow that down. I'm gonna talk about it more tomorrow night. Me and Ali are gonna have a stream. I keep not reaching out to progressive liberals, so progressive liberal, if you're watching, I want you to come on tomorrow night if you can. We're gonna be talking impeachment tomorrow night. Big day today in that regard. And I would love if any person that would like to defend Donald Trump at this point would like to come on tomorrow night. Please, God, make that fucking happen.
I got one Friday, Revelation News. He's going to be defending Trump on the Magic Sandwich Show against On Raw. So
I need him. I need him, Drag. I need him.
I'll put you into contact with him. I'm not sure if he's going to be around tomorrow though.
Magic Sandwich Show this Friday?
This Friday.
Oh man, I'm gonna be making some popcorn for that.
It's gotta work. I always miss those. I need to make sure I watch that one.
So, Cameron, do you have a YouTube channel, or is there anything you'd like to plug, or any final words you have?
No, I appreciate it, and I enjoyed talking with y'all, and I got a little passionate, and I'm sorry about that, and I appreciate you having me on here.
You're okay, man. I only had to rein you in a couple times. No problem at all. Dragnauct Sylvas, you just mentioned the Magic Sandwich Show this Friday. Yep. Anything else you'd like to mention before we close out?
So Magic Sandwich Show this Friday. I think after that, the last Friday of this month, we're going to have Trey Jadlow and Christian Smith discussing morality. And I think Trey Jadlow takes a bit of Thomistic philosophy when it comes to his morality. So if you're not familiar with Thomas Aquinas, you might want to familiarize yourself with, I think, the four forms or something. That I do terrible at trying to repeat his really, really niche arguments. I'll say that. So tune in, you might learn something. Christian Smith, I think he does neurobiology, I'm not mistaken. I want to say he has background in neurobiology and a bit of psychology as well. So that should be an interesting hangout. Other than that, I talked to Matt Dillahunty today. He and I are going to be eating lunch tomorrow here in Houston and talking about when I'll be on the Magic Sandwich Show. The Atheist Experience. It'll be probably, I'll say, sometime mid to late December. I think that's what we're going to shoot for. So if you're a fan of the Atheist Experience and listen to me, then I will be on there. So
you'll be on there as a co-host.
Yes. Yeah.
Dude, that's fucking awesome, man.
That is awesome.
Congratulations. That's
so
big.
And he mentioned the last Friday of the month about the two fellas that are going to discuss morality. I also predict that Justin, Cameron, myself, and Nakasuchi sometime real soon will be doing another stream here on this channel to further discuss morality. Justin, any final words? Do you have a YouTube channel or anything you'd like to let folks know about?
Yeah, you can find me as Avenus Hermes Justin Wilson. On my YouTube, I usually talk about politics and I guess the controversies of the day. I haven't done a video in like 3 weeks or so, but check out my channel, subscribe, and check me out.
So, I'll put the link to his channel in the comments here or in the description after this post as a video. Are you a Trump supporter by any chance, Justin?
I'm very shy of saying Trump supporter, but I will say that Trump is the good guy in this situation.
Oh,
Yeah.
would you please come back on tomorrow night?
Did you have you seen the news today? Have you seen
Yeah,
it?
the impeachment stuff is so stupid. It's like,
Oh.
Are you available tomorrow night? I'm
Oh,
not gonna be there myself.
poor soul. Poor
I've
soul.
been dropping in, listening to every impeachment.
Okay, so just to kind of fill you in, so Trump's guy turned because he wasn't going to prison for Trump, and threw them all under the bus today, dog. All of them, every single one of them. Pence, Pompeo, Mulvaney.
Let's save that for tomorrow.
What did your hat say?
Yeah.
Oh,
But Justin,
Come on,
can you be here tomorrow night? What time is the stream tomorrow night, Knock?
usually it's 9:00 on Thursdays.
Are you available?
It's
Are you available at 9:00 tomorrow? 9:00 Eastern tomorrow night, Justin.
Wait, what time?
9:00 Eastern tomorrow night.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
All right, I'm going to be sharing your email with Nakasuchi, and he will be emailing you tomorrow, or maybe before he goes to bed at night.
You don't have
here's
to
the thing.
watch the news.
But here's the thing, Justin, and he'll be just as fair as we were tonight. It won't get outrageous or anything. But my son Nakasuchi and myself, I would say, in the last few months between the two of us, we have done dozens of streams about Donald Trump, and each time we try and find someone who wants to come, or more than one person to come on and carry Donald Trump's water to defend Trump. And we can never get anybody to come on. Nobody wants to do it. You would be the unicorn if you come on tomorrow night. So
All right.
again, yeah.
Sure.
So it'd be awesome to have you come on and hear somebody that would finally come forward and defend Trump. Because most of them just want to do it in social media. That's awesome.
I definitely can't use my Southern racist argument against you.
I wonder why. I really wonder why.
Immutable Destiny.
You're not Southern, obviously.
Immutable Destiny. You have any final words? Anything you have coming up you want people to know about?
No, then I'm just here for the fun and interesting conversations. Of course, thank you to people who actually do things with their life, from people like Dragnauct and Knock, who are kind enough to host these rooms to have these kind of conversations.
Well, actually, motherfucker, I'm the host tonight.
Yeah,
I'm a guest. I'm a guest.
Yeah, thank you for hosting the stream, and hopefully we all learned something about each other's position, came to a more genuine understanding of it.
Yeah, and again, my apologies for not seeing the messages you guys were shooting me earlier. So at any rate, I want to thank all of you for coming on. My channel is the Amateur Conversationalist. And before the month is out, I will be having the premiere episode of the Apostate Alliance podcast, where we're going to be talking to ex-Muslims. I also do a once-a-week stream on the Great Debate Community channel. We'll be doing something there on Saturday, and I'm going to predict that we're going to be talking about Trump again this Saturday. And just want to thank everybody for coming by, everybody that here on the panel, and everybody that came to watch. And as Nakasuchi says, be the conversation.